Ричард Хэм, геймдизайнер, участвовавший в создании таких игр, как Syphon Filter и Fable 2, дал мне интервью, в котором поделился интересными подробностями разработки и рассказал о индустрии тех лет. Всем привет, с вами Улетный Гусь. Готовя ролик по игре Syphon Filter, решил написать Ричарду Хэму. К моему удивлению, он не проигнорировал сообщение и согласился ответить на мои вопросы. Но с одним условием. Прежде я должен был ознакомиться с его предыдущими интервью, чтобы не задавать одно и то же. Спустя несколько недель я получил ответ в формате видео. Интервью получилось действительно интересным, и сам Ричард произвел впечатление открытого и жизнерадостного человека, несмотря на то, что сейчас он уже не играет в видеоигры, сосредоточившись на индустрии настольных игр. Создание русских субтитров и монтаж видеоряда заняли у меня немало времени, но думаю, результат получился достаточно интересным. Это мой первый опыт в таком формате, поэтому не исключаю, что мог допустить какие-то огрехи. Буду признателен за конструктивную критику. Я решил выпустить это видео раньше основного ролика по Syphon Filter, потому что работа над ним заняла слишком много времени, и мне уже давно хотелось поделиться с вами чем-то новым. Возможно, к моменту, когда вы смотрите это видео, выпуск по Syphon Filter уже доступен на канале. Не забудьте проверить. Приятного просмотра и не забудьте включить субтитры в плеере YouTube.
Hey Ilya, I am sorry it has taken me so long to get to your questions. That always just seems to be the way it ends up when I do one of these. I just assume, oh yeah, easy peasy, I'll just bang it out. And then just, days go by, weeks go by, and it just takes me quite a while to get around to it. But I am here now. I am around to it. I am going to sit down, and I know you sent a first list and then a second list. Let me see if I can find it. I think, there we go. Interview about Syphon Filter development. Is that it? Yeah. All right, so just move that over there, and those are the questions. Let's just go.
Let's go.
Number one, why was the default aiming in Syphon Filter and many other games from that era inverted? What was the reasoning behind the choice? Was it generally considered a more intuitive or preferred setup at the time? It was just the standard. Really, it wasn't just us that did it. I think everybody was. Now, if I were to trace the lineage, I'd be willing to bet you money that by default, the view is inverted in Quake. Right? Quake was certainly the first really successful first-person view three-dimensional game. Wolfenstein and Marathon, there were tons of like quasi 3D first-person shooters, but they were all really like 2D. You were just basically on two planes. There was no looking up or down in most any of these games, or just like the most rudimentary basic stuff. Well, actually that's not true. There was one. Before Quake, there was Descent. Descent was the truly revolutionary, and they made a big deal at the time. We're real 3D. We are first person with 360 degrees of motion, because of course you were you were some kind of robotic mining ship in a mine that had to shoot off aliens or something like that. And so that was the first time that because most everybody was using your keyboard just to, maybe the WASD was there, but it was mostly just looking around, or I remember back in the day, I had a gamepad, a programmable joystick, so I could play Wolfenstein on my PC. But Descent came along and said, no, we're gonna use that mouse for looking up and down as well. And of course, ideally, you were supposed to play Descent with a joystick, because Descent was a flight simulator. It just happened to be a science fiction vehicle that could spin 360 degrees and you could find yourself upside down. It was very disorienting. But they said, mouse too. All right, well, let's just go on ahead and, on a joystick, you push forward, that means you look down. So obviously, if you push forward on the mouse, you should look down. And that was the standard. And I would bet money, not a lot of money, but some money, that was the default on Quake. Because I bet you the developers of Quake were saying, that's the way it was in Descent. Okay, that's how pretty much all game development works. That's how pretty much all creative endeavors work. People stand on the shoulders of what's come before and learn lessons and get inspiration from and do the next thing. So that's why it was normal. I wonder what game finally turned things around. Let's see. If anything, I bet you it was Call of Duty. Did the original Call of Duty not have, I'm talking about on PC, did it not do inverted by default? If that might be the start. I bet you Turok wasn't inverted. That was another huge breakthrough. That was the first time on console that we had, PC style controls using an analog stick to look around. Turok was the first one, I believe. And so whatever its was, everybody copied. But then it was interesting, and I remember over time, console really bifurcated into, okay, copy Call of Duty or copy Halo, one or the other. And I think ultimately Call of Duty won. And that is now the standard to this day when you're talking about console controls for a first-person shooter. But yeah, it was just the norm because that's what had come before. It took me a long time to untrain myself and say, well, no, these days, when I made Brink, I made a first-person shooter. It's like, okay, inverted is not the default. I have to break that habit. I have to be more like regular gamers. But at the time, it was just the most natural thing in the world to us because we thought of 3 dimensions, and the only thing that we had reference point to were flight simulators. Before first-person shooter went fully 3D, the only 3D in video games were flight simulators, and those were dive, climb. So that's the way it was. 2, I've replayed a number of classic PlayStation 1 games and noticed an interesting pattern. Until '99, developers rarely implemented in-game tutorials. As I understand, the manual is typically included as a printed booklet inside the game case. Yes, is that not? Of course, there's no such thing as a game case anymore. Right, yeah. I've written a few of those manuals myself. A small side note, I never personally owned a PlayStation 1 disc back in my childhood. Russia, they were a rarity. But around '99, things began to change. For example, Syphon Filter included a tutorial video. What caused that shift? What influenced that move towards in-game tutorials? That's very interesting. Of course, we did not actually have, a full in-game tutorial because I've never been a fan of making players go through 15 minutes of, hey, let's play in the jungle gym. Or let's go through this heavily scripted adventure that is so blatantly, obviously here just to teach you basic controls. I hate that. I would much rather just strip all that artifice away and say, okay, right there is the door that starts the game. To get there, you gotta, I guess I'd rather do a jungle gym, but I'd rather just tell them. And the thing is, even though rule books were common back then, physical, nobody read them. And the thing is, we knew Syphon Filter was so radically different than anything else at the time. And if I'd had my druthers, as you know from some of my other interviews, it would have been even more different. And we were, we did a lot of focus testing. And we saw a lot of people, their big complaint about the game was, it was very, very hard. And just very different. And they had a hard time coming to terms with controls. I'm like, okay, well fine, we'll just teach you. Why not? It can't be that hard. And so we just made some videos, right? That's how we did it, didn't we? Yeah. I have to admit, I'm kind of guessing. Honestly, there's a lot of this stuff back, what are we talking about? Over a quarter of a century ago. And a lot of these things I just have not thought about. But I do remember I fought to my dying breath to have one hit. The whole point of the original system was a single bullet will kill you. But that's okay because it's really your third bullet. Because your first 2 bullets will get absorbed by your flak jacket, and your third bullet will kill you. But that's okay, because no one's ever going to kill you because you have a second life meter. See, I always considered the danger meter to be the true life meter. That, the longer you stand still and don't dodge away to cover or roll, the meter fills. To me, what that was mechanically was the same thing as, I'm just getting hit over and over again. How do I heal myself? By rolling or going away, and then the danger meter falls back down. And only once the danger meter completely fills, once it's filled, the next 3 bullets will kill you. 1, 2, 3. Flak jacket, dead. And ultimately, actually, I think originally there was no flak jacket. It was just, okay, once that danger meter is full, the next bullet will kill you. So you had time, it was filling up the whole time, and you just didn't do anything about it. And yeah, that was very foreign and strange, and nobody could get their head around it. And I loved it because I wanted to create, a real John Woo cinematic thing where, Chow Yun Fat is just in constant motion, and that's how he stays alive. But yeah, so people didn't go for it. But, target locking was a completely foreign concept. Changing objective, whatever it is we taught, is because we felt we had to, because we were such a weird, odd duck game. 3, one One thing that really surprised me in Syphon Filter was how customizable the controls were. Nearly every button in the controller could be remapped. Why was this such a flexible system? Because that was the norm for computer games at the time. Every computer game had a page where you could go and say, oh, here's all the actions you can do, and you can put them on any key you want. Because on the computer, of course, you had your entire QWERTY keyboard, or whatever keyboard you had for whatever region you're in. So you could make it whatever you wanted. And again, that was just normal. To me, it would have been weird not to do that. And it's weird to me to this day that nobody did. I remember when we were working on Brink, and I said, oh yeah, I know nobody else does this on console, but we're gonna do it. It's not that much work. It's not that hard, but it's worth doing it, even if it's only for a small percentage of players who need it. Because most players are just gonna use the Call of Duty analog, or they're gonna use the Battlefield analog, because basically everybody just has, okay, look, we're copying all these different core games, so you can just pick one of them. But I said, no, just go the extra mile, it's worth it. But yeah, at some point that just never caught on, even though for many, many years it was standard because that's the way it was on PC games. And I was a PC gamer making a console game. Okay, now for the interesting part. Questions about Syphon Filter specifically. Playing SF again as an adult, I found some moments weren't as intuitive as I remembered, just by design, or I've been spoiled by the convenience of modern game design. For example, the subway level with the explosion. Once you find the C4, you have to unlock a path for the bomb tech to disarm the bomb. I spent 20 minutes running in circles before I realized a small, easy miss spot where you could climb up to the higher level. I assumed the explosive had to be used to save floor where I found it. And in the expo center, I wander, oh, it's gonna be the sparks, isn't it? It's gonna be the elevator. Wander around for ages, find a key, sparking, until I accidentally shot a sparking elevator button. You did not accidentally shoot that. We did plenty of play testing. And for players at the time, that was something that they got stuck on. And we're like, okay, the thing is, we were going out of our way. It was a mission statement of ours. It was mostly a mission statement of John Garvin, our lead artist, who really wanted to up the three-dimensional nature of the gameplay. That's why the level he designed is the jungle gym of the cathedral, which is the most three-dimensional level in the game. But yeah, I mean, I agreed with it. I believed with it because at that time 3D was kind of unheard of, and it was like, oh, we can actually play in a third dimension. How much fun! And also, I should say, at the time, it's funny. I was one of the lead designers on Fable 2. And you remember Fable 2 is famous for many things, the dog and all that. But it's also famous for that glitter trail that tells you exactly where everything is. I hated that glitter trail. Peter was adamant we had to put it in. It ate a lot of CPU cycles. It created slowdown. It created headaches for so many bugs for the programmers. And then I hated it because it just spoon-fed everything to the player. It, as you said, spoiled them by telling them exactly where everything is, so they never had to explore. I liken it to how GPS in my car has ruined my ability to find things in the world. It used to be you had to pay attention to landmarks, but now you just do what Google Maps or Waze or whatever tells you. And it's the same, it's even more so for video games. But that was not the way. Back in the day in Doom didn't tell you where the blue and the yellow and the red key were to open the blue, yellow, and red door. They didn't tell you where the blue, the yellow, and the red door was. They didn't tell you where anything was. They just said, go. Just go. Figure it out. See what you can find. And that was the norm because games were genuinely harder back then. They just were. And players expected it. And over time, the paradigm has shifted, and gamers like, look, I don't have time to figure out your dumb little puzzles, even though, that's what we were trying to do. We wanted to engender in Syphon Filter a sense of exploration because that's the way video games were. Video games were about exploring a world. Nowadays, you can, but you don't have to. The exploration is optional because we'll just tell you. In my day, it was mandatory. And the reason, back to the museum, those sparks are coming off is because that was the only thing that universally players could not figure out. And again, we were not going to do a system where we told you exactly where everything was. We told you contextually where things were. We told you, hey, you got to find the, or whatever, but you had to figure it out yourself. And so, in the case of that, we figured, well, what can we do? Well, let's put some sparks on it, and not just sparks, but a flashing light. So that if they're looking around, that would draw their eye. And if they're looking at it, well, just out of curiosity, maybe they'd shoot it. Because the thinking was, because don't forget, in Syphon Filter, you can shoot out every single light everywhere. We originally, remember you carry a flashlight? We originally wanted to do much more stuff. There would be like, all the lights get shot out, and now you got to put the flashlight and find things in the dark. And, we had a lot of ambitions. Not all of it made it there. But we figured, maybe people would just be curious and shoot it and see if it would blow up. Because that was another thing too. Back in the day, every barrel would explode when you shot it. If you saw anything interesting in the world, you shot it. That's the way you interacted with the world back then. So we figured, people would shoot it, and they do, and they shot a switch. But the thing is, the positioning of the only way you could shoot it is if you were actually standing on that elevator. You couldn't get an angle on it if you weren't standing on the elevator. Or maybe you could, but even then you'd see the elevator go, you're like, So that was the thinking. That was just the way it was back then. People had to solve exploration puzzles. And you're talking about 2 exploration puzzles. And exploration puzzles largely don't exist anymore. Or, I don't know. I have not. The last game I played any serious level was the second Batman, Arkham City. I finished that one all the way through. And I've never really played a modern AAA console or PC game since then, because I just don't care, because board games are 10,000 times better than video games. And that's why I work in board games now. But I don't remember ever having a hard time finding anything in that game, because that's just the way things are now. You ask, are just current audiences spoiled? I say yes, but only because I'm an old man saying, in my day, you actually had to search and figure things out. And that's not that's not fair. Obviously there are puzzles in games. Obviously there are still things to figure out and whatnot. It's just different. The stuff that we had to figure out in our day, because we couldn't do really complex, elaborate cause and effect chains, which is kind of what you solve now. The puzzles you solve now are these big, complex, cause and effect things. We couldn't pull those off. So our puzzles were just trying to find the door, because it was a simpler time and we had simpler games made with simpler tools and simpler controllers. Number 2, were there any decisions made during the development that you now regret? Anything you feel embarrassed about? Something you'd handled differently knowing what you know today? Gosh, yeah. Yes. The number one thing a million things. If I spent all afternoon with you, I would probably come up with 50 things. I'd really have to put myself... First of all, I've not played the game in many, many years, but I pretty much remember how it plays. But I think by far, the number one thing is the weird compromise of control schemes. That when you're not target locked, you have tank controls. You have, character relative controls. Because left and right rotates the character left and right. But then as soon as you target lock, you have screen relative controls, because left and right moves you left and right on the screen, or at least, makes you straight. And that's just dumb. For the longest time, we only had screen relative controls, but those were very rare. At that point, Mario 64, which really kind of invented and popularized the idea of screen relative controls. But you remember playing Mario 64? It was such a weird alien concept that there was a free moving camera, that they literally made the camera a character that you could see in mirrors, because it was such a weird concept that you knew audiences would have a hard time understanding what is just now taken for granted. We were doing the same thing. And the first time we ever went to Essen, I think maybe even that first PlayStation Magazine demo had 100% screen relative controls. And should have done that. Should have left it that way. Should have had courage of convictions. In the end, it was a compromise. We had a mix of old and new. Old-fashioned stuff, which basically makes Gabe a tank, because that's kind of what players were used to doing from Wolfenstein and other games. But then we also had the new hotness, but we only did it when you pushed a button. And I regret that now. Now, I'm not saying it was the wrong choice. It could be that it was the right choice, but I do regret it. I feel like we'd be even more innovative if we just gone whole hog. Plus, it means literally almost in the final hour, in the final month or two of development, we got prototypes of the first ever dual analog sticks. I'm sorry. That was on Syphon Filter 2. And so we were like, what the heck are we supposed to do with these things? And I didn't give it any thought, and I just did something that's really terrible and useless. and dumb. And it could have been me. It could have been Syphon Filter 2 that invented the paradigm of analog stick controllers instead of Turok. If I just thought about it for like a day. And so I regret that a lot too. You know, there's stuff I regret. You know, I regret the one hit that ultimately Rainbow Six went on ahead and did very spectacularly. Or if we were gonna, I was gonna say maybe doing it like, because basically everything I described about how your danger meter is really a life meter, that's ultimately what Call of Duty went and did. Call of Duty has this stupid thing that just makes no thematic sense whatsoever. And the first time I saw it, I thought, God, I can't believe you people are getting away with this. And I didn't get away with it. Because the notion is that, oh, if I'm getting shot. And as soon as I go run and hide, or I move around, then after a little bit of time, I heal. That's exactly what the danger meter does. It's getting dangerous. If I take that last shot, now that it's full and it's flashing, I will die. So I have to, quote, heal. And, you know, Call of Duty just made it this weird, unusual thing that soldiers are immortal. And if they just hide behind a rock, they magically heal. But, oh, okay, I take everything else back. It's an interface choice. I'm so dumb. By far, the single stupidest thing in all of Syphon Filter is the fact that I put the danger meter and the life meter, and remember it's 2 life meters on top of each other, which actually I thought that was kind of clever. Oh, the red starts getting exposed once the armor goes down. I actually like that. But I put the armor / life and the danger meter up in the corner of the screen because that's just the way things were done, and I never thought about it for a second. Because you know what's really brilliant? I'm pretty sure it was Call of Duty that did this first. And I saw that and I'm like, oh, I'm so stupid. Why didn't I do that? You know what you're not doing when you're fighting for life and death? When you're nervous and you're sweating and you're making mistakes or whatever, and you're just focusing on trying to kill everybody that's on the screen before they kill you. You know what you're not doing then? You're not paying attention to a bunch of meters that are growing and shrinking up there in the corner of the screen. At best, they're in your peripheral vision. So Call of Duty, all they did is they took I'm sure they didn't know this. I'm sure they weren't copying me. They accidentally copied me. They took my danger meter from up here, moved it down here, put it in the center of the screen, and then, you know, because it's the red that shows getting more and more hit. So that, oh, when my danger meter is filling up, i.e. when I'm getting hit, I can still look at what I'm trying to fight. I don't have to look up in the corner. Another thing I put off in the corner, against the danger meter, the freaking radar that shows you that, oh, you're about to be killed from a bad guy in this direction. You don't have time to look at that. Nobody looks at that. And again, Call of Duty just brought it here in the center. And so, oh, the hit was from that direction or it was from that direction. So dumb. Anyway, though, bring the interface into the game. But that's just not the way we did things in my day. That is, so I am kicking myself to this day that I did not think of that. That was really dumb of me. So yeah, and like I said, you could have just asked me this one question, I would have given you an hour video, but you've got a bunch of other questions, I'm going to keep going. 3, are there any funny or hacky workaround solutions used during development? Something along the lines of the famous Fallout 3 train being implemented as a hat on the NPC's head to get around engine limitation. I have never heard of that. Well, I mean, obviously, the entirety of the train in Syphon Filter 2 is a hack because, spoiler alert, it's not moving. It's just we have these big repeating chunks of the terrain that are moving, that are going by, and a little bit of a camera shake and sound effects, and boom, you feel like you're on a moving train. The biggest one is the fact that one of my big directives is I wanted to ensure you were getting attacked a lot. Because if you look at the history of shooters, you had Wolfenstein, and then you had Doom. I think I've never mentioned Doom, but I should have mentioned Doom. And it was standard to be, I remember first time I ever walked into a room in Doom and there were like 20 Caco demons. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Because they were all sprites and they could do it. And it was effectively a 2-dimensional game, so they could do it. And I wanted to have that feeling because when Quake came out as the first, or second if you count Descent, but even Descent and Quake came out, you never fight more than 1 or 2 monsters at a time because the computing power at that time just couldn't allow bad guys to function. I mean, it was too much computing power to do that. So only a few bad guys to fight, and they're just bigger and tougher, and they're big, bullet sponges. And I didn't like that. I missed, having a big one, and I wanted to have that feeling of, again, Chow Yun-Fat in The Killers, or something like that, just surrounded everywhere, constantly under fire. I wanted that feel. And so the only way the programmers could do it would be if they just never moved. Okay, then they just can't move around. If you want to have, you can have 6 or 7 bad guys. You can have 10 bad guys if they all stand still and just shoot at you. I'm like, well, no, I want them to take cover, and I want them to roll and be exciting, and all that stuff. I said, okay, there's a reason why there's only 2 or 3 bad guys in Descent and Quake, because that's what you get. And I'm like, no. So we had a compromise. We didn't have 10 stationary bad guys. We didn't have, 2 or 3 fully functional bad guys. Instead, we had a hard limit. 5 bad guys is the most can attack you, and as much as possible, I always tried to ensure that was happening. And to be able to do that, they couldn't all be on screen at the same time. So they always had to attack you from multiple directions. That's why you're always surrounded in the game, because they couldn't all be on screen at once. And then the other thing is they don't move, or at least they have no concept of the world. They don't collide with anything. They are just moving across invisible spaghetti strings that me and Jeff Ross spend, hundreds of hours massaging. And if we want a bad guy to roll, to look like it's an action movie, they look like they roll behind cover, that's because we made a line for them that's, okay, run along here, and then when you get to that vertex, oh, you're gonna run to the next vertex? Whenever you move between these 2 vertexes, roll. And we had to make sure we made the vertexes the exact correct length so that it would exactly fit. Otherwise, things would get broken and they wouldn't be moving around correctly anymore. And those guys at the beginning of the subway, you know how they kind of climb up the walls and then they stay up on the wall and shoot at you? They don't. If you were to look, you'd see, no, they're just running in place, moving up an invisible spaghetti line like that. Because all they'll do is just follow the lines we created. So that's like a super hack that's everywhere in Syphon Filter 1, 2, and 3 because of a limit of our tech. So that's one. But I don't think that's funny. I don't know if we have funny ones. It's just, we were desperate. 4, do you think there's any chance Syphon Filter would receive a remake someday? Honestly, I can't think of any AAA games with similar atmosphere and setting. I don't understand why it's happened. I mean, yeah, we're not as big as Tomb Raider or Metal Gear Solid or something like that. But our fans are legion. I remember being so proud that when 989 Studios did a press announcement saying they have the #1 selling PC game in the world, EverQuest, and the #1 selling console game in the world, Syphon Filter, at the same time, the year we came out. And that was amazing. So yeah, I think there's a lot of love, and it makes no sense to me why it has never happened. I have dropped hints to people in the past that I would have unretired to come in not as a full-time developer, but as a consultant to help. But the fact that it hasn't happened so far makes me think there must be somebody at Sony who just doesn't want it to happen, who hates Syphon. I don't know. It's weird. It makes no sense to me. In the era of remakes, why not remake one of the biggest Sony published games of all time? Go figure. Last one. Oh no, that was your last one. Oh, more general question. I imagine you still keep an eye on the industry, watching trailers, gameplay videos, maybe even tuning into a stream. Do you think modern games are still as good as they once were? Or is there something special about the earlier era that we've lost? I'll be honest, I do not pay much attention. There was a YouTube show called Cool Ghosts I used to watch until it stopped. For a while, I was watching Dave Jaffe because, my friend, John Garvin and Jeff Ross, they went on his show, and I watched his show for that. And then I watched for a while, so I was kind of keeping an eye because he talks about whatever's going on in video games. But I didn't watch very long because I realized, I just don't care. I care about the people I worked with, but I don't care about the medium anymore because I'm just over video games. It literally took, 40 years. I was playing video games since probably 1972, playing Pong, all the way up till I was 45 years old, when I retired from the video game industry and just never looked back. So it took a long time for me to get burned out, but I did eventually get burned out. And it was because it turns out modern board games are just such a better experience for me and my wife to share. And I care about sharing my time on this world with my wife than with random strangers online. That's just a no-brainer to me. So yeah, video games, don't care. So I don't really follow. But based on what little I do know, I don't know. Like I said, I was talking about this earlier. It was definitely a different time. It was a simpler time. And it was a time where we demanded a lot more of players. Games were much more challenging, or much more brutal, much more unforgiving. Because of course, don't forget, video games really came from the arcade, where they wanted to give you the impression that, you know what, if you just put one more quarter in, you'll do better and you'll get to play longer. So they didn't want to completely crush your spirits, but they wanted to make it so challenging that you kept pumping quarters in. And that was and of course you have that now, but it's just it's, you know, what is it, microtransactions and whatnot, where you just want to make it addictive enough, give it to them for free, and then put them in a spot where, oh, this is a hurdle for me. There's a road bump. I could either deal with the road bump or I could pump a quarter into the machine, or, you know, whatever microtransactions go for these days. I don't know. It's the same psychology. So I guess in some ways we've come full circle. But in between these two extremes, you know, there was a growth where, you know, early video games were brutal. Early video games didn't let you save your progress. Early video games gave you finite lives. And if you ran out of lives and you didn't find any one-ups, you had to start all the way at the beginning. And that's the way it was, and we liked it. We loved it. We reveled in the challenge. But back then, video games were predominantly played by kids. And we had the time, and we had the obsessive compulsive nature to put into that. Nowadays, sure, there's plenty, but, you know, all those kids, like me, I was playing an Atari 2600 in the early 80s. I don't know how many times I spent levitating my way out of holes in the original E.T., out of pits and stuff like that. But nowadays, they've all grown up. Multiple generations of those kids have grown up. And most don't stop playing like me. They keep playing. And those kids who grew up and are still playing, they don't have all the time in the world. They've got jobs. They've got families. They've got responsibilities. And so the art form evolved to meet the needs of its evolving player base. And when I was making my games, we were in a big transition period. You know, I mean, perfect example. There were two games I took inspiration from more than anything else. Tomb Raider for the target locking. Tomb Raider didn't have target locking, but it almost did, and I thought, oh, I'm gonna fix Tomb Raider. And GoldenEye, because GoldenEye didn't have what was common at the time, red, blue, and yellow keys defined. They had objectives. Now, functionally, yeah, they were just red, blue, and yellow keys, but they couched them in a story like the movie. And that was very, very cool. And you know one of the things I freaking hated about GoldenEye? If you made it almost all the way through a level, but then you died, you had to start all the way at the beginning of the level. And that was murder. These levels could take an hour to finish. So I had the brilliant idea, what if every time you finish an objective, save point? That is something a lot of people don't talk about. The automatic save your progress as you go. Then, you know, oh, I did it. Finish the objective, I'm safe. Now if I die, I won't have to go all the way back to the beginning. Like I said, games creative endeavors, movies build upon movies, shows build upon shows, books build upon books, games build upon games. And, you know, that's just another example. So were things better back then? They were certainly different. And maybe they were better for that time and place, but I don't think players that existed back then, they don't exist now. So that was your first email. Then you sent another one. Where was it? Okay, here we go. So, while working on my script for Syphon Filter video and reviewing my gameplay footage, I realized there are 4 more questions. Okay. 1, why was the decision made not to mark target locations on the map, or at least highlight the general area where the objectives were found? Well, first of all, remember, that was not a map. That was not intended to be a map. That was only intended to be a combat guide because of the limitations that if I wanted 5 bad guys attacking you, there can never be more than 3 in front of you and then the other 2 were behind, and 3-dimensional gameplay was still a new thing. The only reason that radar, it's not a map, it's a radar, exists is to replicate that in the real world, if somebody is behind me shooting, I don't know where they are, but I know they're behind me. I know they're kind of back there somewhere, just from the sound, just from my, sense of presence in the world. You just have that, but you don't have that in a video game. So that is the only reason it was there. Now, if somebody had suggested, hey, you know what we could do? We could up the functionality of that, and we could actually put locations on there. Well, see my earlier answer to your thing about the museum elevator. That's not the way we did things back then. Back in the day, people had to find their own way. We were not going to tell anybody where to go. It was part of exploring the world. It was literally just about the only puzzle we could put into a game. Find the key to open the door. That was the extent of our technology and our design. So if you had suggested it to me, and I bet you it probably never even occurred to me at the time, I would have thought about it and I would have said, yeah, but then we're just giving everything away and you don't have to explore. That's a terrible, because that would just be weird. Why would you do that? Why would you take the joy of discovery and exploration away from players? Because remember, I come from a world where, the NES, my favorite games on NES were not Mario, Super Mario Brothers, go from left to right, win the game. My favorites were Metroid and Zelda. Search. Zelda doesn't tell you where the key is for the dungeon. You find it yourself. You keep walking around. Zelda doesn't tell you, oh, you gotta find a way up into the northwest. How do I get up there? Well, I guess there must be a wall I have to bomb. So I guess I'll start looking. You gotta find it yourself. That's the way it was, and we liked it. So, yeah, there was never a decision because that is such a foreign, alien concept to us at the time. In my playthrough, you assume an objective was ahead, only to reach the end of the level, all was complete. That meant I had to backtrack through an empty area, find what I missed. Yeah, that's the way gaming was back in the day. And you're like, oh, okay. And you felt a sense of satisfaction when you finally found it. And you weren't frustrated because you were getting to play a game. It was fun. It means, okay, I'm not done with the level. I'll keep fighting. I mean, you're there to play the game. Why would you be upset that you have to play the game more? It's just weird. Whereas now, everything, objectives didn't exist. You have to remember, Syphon Filter, the only objective in games was find a key to open the door. That was it. And we were trying to do something different. Even though at the end of the day, our objectives are just find a key to open a door. But yeah, now, games are so much more rich in what they can do, the tools they have to create an experience. People have more robust expectations, whereas we had simpler expectations. So it wouldn't be seen as a chore back then. I remember I did Pitfall: The Lost Expedition, and it was a Metroidvania game, right? And it was an ode to that, because when Pitfall: The Lost Expedition came out, something happened when Sonic the Hedgehog came out. And it kind of ruined 2D side-scroller gaming for me. Because before Sonic the Hedgehog, everybody was emulating, or a lot of players or developers were emulating Metroid and Castlevania. And they were making complex games where you have to backtrack and you have to, I've made it all the way there, now it's open, now I gotta go all the way to the other side of the world because a new door is there and I get to explore a new thing. And I have to fight. And I enjoy playing the game, so that's fun. That's the way it was. And so we did Pitfall: The Lost Expedition, and we did that, and we leaned into it. We put some shortcuts in, but only if you found them yourself. Because this was a game for hardcore players who were not being spoon-fed anything. And we got so much backlash from people saying, I can't believe you make me walk through a level I've already been in. How dare you? Why can't I just teleport to the door? And that was mind-blowing to me, that anybody would ever say or think that. Because to me that means, oh, you're saying the game is implicitly not fun. You're not playing the game here to have fun, just experiencing the joy of moving through a virtual world and doing prestidigitation and with your hands to manipulate a character and beat and overcome obstacles. You're not here for that. You're here to just open present boxes. You just want to keep opening boxes. And everything else is just the method you get to open boxes. And that's the design aesthetic these days? That's not the way it used to be. And it was mind-blowing to me that anybody would think that. But I learned my lesson. What I wanted to do with Fable 2 was say, yeah, we will put the location of the objective on the minimap. what you suggested should be in Fable, I learned my lesson. I was going to put it in Fable. And we did, but Peter said, no, that's not good enough. We need to put a little glowing trail to, literally it was called the breadcrumb trail, a trail of breadcrumbs. That's what we called it internally. I don't remember if we called that ever outside of development. That will take them directly where they want to go. And I thought he was taking it too far. But you know what? Peter Molyneux is a freaking visionary. And me, I'm always a creature of what I know. So maybe he was right. I don't know. Number 2. I also felt, due to the large size of the levels, there was a lack of progression, blocking mechanisms to prevent the player from moving forward before completing objectives in a given area. For instance, in the first level, DC, I assume you're talking about, of Syphon 1, it's possible to head down the subway, realizing there's a mid-level objective involving helping the bomb squad. If the player forgets about this task, or assume it happens in the subway, they'll only realize something is missing at the very end, when the game won't let them continue and says not all objectives are complete. The levels are frustrating, backtracking through. Okay, we were talking about the same thing. When you say it's frustrating to backtrack through a level, what to me and my old school head, what you're saying is, I really don't enjoy playing the game. All I want to do is open another present box and see what's inside. And I'm just playing the game so I can open the next box. And if you make me play the game more than I feel that I should have to play it to open the next present box, I'm going to find that frustrating. Again, to this day, that makes no sense to me. Like I said, I've been playing games since the 70s. I can't tell you how many hundreds of hours I spent traipsing from one side of the kingdom of Atari 2600 Adventure from one side to the other and back again, over and over again. And I never got frustrated. Because for me, what's it? When people are complaining about, being frustrated by the ending of a thing, it's not the destination, it's the journey. It's the adventure you had along the way. If you got all the way to the end of the subway, I guarantee you now have to fight your way back out of the subway and fight your way to the other street. And that should be fun. And honestly, I'm going to say it is fun. But it's not fun enough. But I don't know if it ever could be fun enough, because that is a core central tenet of game now. I think, and again, I'm out of touch, I could be wrong, that players expect games to be a series of presents they get to open. And if they don't get to open enough of them fast enough, they'll pull out their credit card and they'll buy them so they can open them. That's why, they're literally packaged as boxes that open up. It's just a fundamental different thing. I assume you're in your 20s or your 30s, and you grew up in a world where this is the way video games have always been. But it is not the way they have always been. Is it better or worse? Who's to say? It's all personal preference. You ask, why was it handled this way rather than simply locking access to the subway until all surface objectives were completed? That kind of gate could have helped narrow the search and maintain the game's momentum. Because it's fun to explore. If the exploration does not contain the potential for a dead end, then it's not really exploration. It's not really learning. It's just more passive experience that is put on top of the player. That the player, it's closer to watching TV than playing a game. It's the same thing as, why not just make players invincible and let bad guys shoot at me, but I never die? There has to be the threat of death for it to be meaningful, to have the combat be meaningful. By the same token, by my philosophy of design, being an old man, there has to be the threat of a dead end to make exploration meaningful. So yeah, but it's a different world now. Okay, on to number 3. In Kazakhstan military base, I accidentally discovered the cover leaning mechanism. If you enter first person A and use the hold strafe, you get to, This feature was not mentioned in the training video. Why was it simply overlooked? Perhaps added late in development. The rest of the game was already finalized. There's something it wasn't supposed to make it in the final version. No, but it definitely wasn't accidentally left in. And of course, I use it all the time. Why didn't? If that didn't get mentioned, that was a mistake in the tutorial phase. And I will tell you, the tutorial phase was a very, very last minute addition to the game, because we had focus testing saying people really want to like the game, but they're very frustrated because this game is so weird and alien. The controls are different. You know, there's these concepts like target locking and all of that. So I can only guess. I don't remember. It's either one or two things. Either I suspect it's we realize, you know what, people are only going to watch a video for so long. So let's just leave this out. It's an advanced technique. People will discover it for themselves. Or they'll RTFM, read the effing manual where it clearly explains it. Where, you know, it's right there in black and white. Or we left it out. Now here's the deal. You don't need it. So that's why I'm thinking, we probably said, look, this is not something we need to teach them when we're already overloading them, because here's another huge compromise that was made in the development of Syphon Filter. Syphon Filter has two difficulties, normal and hard. You may not have known that. That is because, and for me, it is a waste of time to play Syphon Filter unless you're playing on hard difficulty. Because it means the bad guys do more damage, you have less time where you can stand still before they start beating the crap out of you. Sorry, I don't know what the audience is for this. And it's just overall a more challenging game. And much more fun. Oh my gosh, the outdoor warehouse level with the battle going on is so much fun when you're really in danger of dying because you're playing on hard mode. Here's the problem. We had very limited, you know, Sony, or 989 Studios, I should say, were great publishing partners up to a point, but there was only so much money. And one of the big compromises was we did not have much of a robust testing department. And the testers said, you know what? We do not have time to bug test this game to find any bugs. Well, because basically their argument is we have to test this game twice. We have to test it for everything in regular mode and hard mode. That doubles the amount of work we can do. We barely have enough time as it is. I mean, Syphon Filter is a relatively bug-free game because this was in a time where you couldn't patch games, and so you tried to make sure they were bug-free. And they were, look, we just can't do it. And so I had the brilliant idea. All right. Well, what if we take it off the menu? There's no longer new game, choose difficulty level. What if we make it a code and you have to do a code on the title screen? And therefore, you don't have to test it because it's a bonus. It's not part of the game. And I think there were like meetings about this and testing rule books had to be written about it. But they said, yeah, okay, we'll do that. And so that's why, in the last minute, the hard mode got cut effectively. And it broke my heart. But you know what? You will, I mean, you just don't need to peek. But you need that peek maneuver desperately to survive when you're playing on hard mode, which is the real way to play. And so, since hard mode is gone and oh crap, we have to do this video. You know what? Okay, we can't do everything. Let's just leave that off to the side. And if, you know, they'll discover it by accident, if they're really expert players, and hey, you did. That means you're a good player. Or they'll read the manual and they'll know about it there. And they'll probably never use it because they don't need to. Go figure. Twist of irony, or, you know, follow-up story to that. Many years later, I'm on Fable 2. Run into the exact same freaking problem. Fable 2 for me is painful because it is so dumbed down in the combat department. I mean, there is no reason for any player to ever die. You know, once you're at a certain skill level, it's so freaking easy. But I didn't care. That was the difficulty level Peter played at. And it was like he's our target. If he's feeling challenged, then we're okay. And Peter never wanted to die. So, okay, fine. But we had a hard mode. And we had a programmer working full time on it for months. And I worked with him very closely. And oh my gosh, the combat was brutal. And you had to be super careful. Standing still to charge up a spell, that would get you killed. Whereas now you can just stand in the middle of a field and just charge up spells to your heart's content. And it was awesome. And then the testing department said, we can't test that. We'd have to double test everything. And I said, well, we did this trick back in Syphon Filter. Are you okay with that? And I was making the argument, it was going through the rounds, but then I got really sick. For the first time in like 3 years of development or whatever it was, I had to take, I think it was just one freaking day off. Maybe it was 2 days, because I was so sick I couldn't bring myself in anymore. And during those 2 days, Peter and the exec producer on the game cut the feature rather than let me make my argument to keep the difficulty mode in. They cut another feature too, which was screenshot mode. We did so much work. We would have been so ahead of the curve. We had this brilliant thing that anybody could take pictures and they would be stored on a cloud before the world knew what the cloud was, and then they could download their pictures onto websites. This was years ahead of anybody else. And they cut that feature because it was too much testing. And they cut both of those on the one time that they knew I was gone and couldn't fight to my dying breath to keep those features in the game. And when I came back and found out, oh yeah, they were already cut. We made that decision while you were out sick. That was the day I decided to quit Lionhead because I felt betrayed and furious. And as you can see, it's what, 15 years later, 20 years later, and I still am. But anyway, so it's funny that that happened to me twice, the difficulty level thing. I don't even remember if that's why you asked. But anyway, oh yeah, you're asking about leaning. Last question. Why does Mara Aramov survive the headshot in the subway but die from a similar shot in the expo center? Why is the subway scene originally scripted, was the subway differently and then changed, leaving the old cutscene in place? No. It was just a compromise we had to make. The conceit was, but we didn't have any kind of fidelity to show this. The conceit was, oh, you shot her in the head, but it didn't go through, it didn't, come in one and, have an exit wound. You grazed her. She was grazed. You grazed her temple, and that knocked her to her feet, and she wasn't dead. Because, of course, she was still alive at the end of the game. Obviously. Here's the deal. We didn't have time to make an in-game cutscene with unique animations showing that. All we could do was play the death animation, because that's all we had. We had so little time. Why do you think most movies in the original Syphon Filter are just Gabe and somebody else walking down a hallway? And if you pay attention, you'll notice it's just the same hallway over and over and over again. There was just no time for that. So yeah, that the conceit was, and it would have been clear if we could have done better with our in-game cutscenes, that she was grazed. And she would and and something I don't know how it would have been done, but that was the intention, because we wanted to make it challenging. We wanted to make you have to stand still and shoot her, but that means she gets farther away. That means you have to deal with the trains more. That was the intent. I think she does eventually stop if the chase goes on long enough, doesn't it? I'm pretty sure it does, because we couldn't let the tunnel keep going. Because on Syphon Filter 1, we had not invented the conceit of a repeating level like Syphon Filter 2, the train. So she does eventually stop and stand still if you don't catch her soon enough. But that was the idea. It was just a compromise. Great. Okay, hopefully those were enjoyable and meaningful. Hopefully this recorded the entire time. It looks like it did. So I'm going to send this your way. And thanks for being a fan. That was fun. These were excellent questions. I have not gotten questions like these before. A lot of fun. Thanks, Ilya. Bye-bye.
Огромное спасибо Ричарду за то, что нашел время ответить на вопросы. В знак благодарности предлагаю подписаться на его YouTube-канал. Ссылка, как всегда, в описании. Если вам понравилось видео, не забудьте поддержать его лайком и подпиской. Это очень помогает развитию канала. Также буду рад вашим мнениям в комментариях. Заглядывайте и в мой Telegram, где делюсь мыслями и выкладываю мемы. А еще у меня есть предложка, где вы можете предлагать идеи для новых выпусков. Если вы хотите поддержать канал, информацию о том, как это сделать, можно найти в описании видео или на странице канала. С вами был Улетный Гусь. До скорых встреч!